Greetings, I'm Rob Chapman and welcome to another Top 10 Tips, Hints and Tricks for Guitarists. Several years back, I shot a video called 10, I think it was 5 or 10, Hints, Tips and Tricks, Hacks for Guitarists. And it's been a while since I shot that, and I've been asked for more of them, or a similar video, and I've got 10 more awesome guitar hacks for you, whether you are a budding enthusiast or a touring amateur. These could be useful pieces of knowledge directly sliced from the Chappers pie for your mouth. Number one, if you are a gigging guitar player, when you tune your guitar is almost as important as actually tuning your guitar. I recommend that you tune your guitar roughly for your sound check, but then make sure that you tune it a second time, about 15 minutes if you can, before you go on. The venue just increases in temperature when hundreds of people flood in, and it makes a big difference. Doesn't matter what the guitar is, it's just gonna move slightly because things warm up, things move. So tune your guitar before you go on, if you can, about 15 minutes, or at least when it's full of people and it's got to the temperature it's approximately gonna be before you start playing. Tip number 2. So here are the 2 or 3 things that I do to know within about 15 seconds if a guitar has been set up or not. Number 1 is what I call the finger test. Take your thumb, put it on the very last, I'm using the G string, but you can use pretty much any string. Put it after the last fret. Fret down the very first fret using the same string. And then your first finger, just dab the string over the 12th fret. And what you're looking for here is a little tiny bit of relief. So the string needs to be in the air, and then if you press down, it should touch the 12th fret. And you're looking for about 1 millimeter of relief. This is how I set my necks. And what that means is that the neck is very slightly curved, not dead straight, and definitely not arched backwards. You can also test this from the 12th, well, you can test it anywhere. From the 12th to the 1st, there should be a little bit of relief in the middle of the fretboard. You're looking for about 1 millimeter. It depends on how you like your feel. But that's a really quick thing. Thumb, first finger, dab that first finger over the 12th fret, and there should be about 1 millimeter, never less than half a mil of play before it touches that 12th fret. That tells you if the neck angle is good. It's fine looking down the neck and thinking that you see a curve or don't see a curve. It's not a test, a true test of whether or not that neck is straight. The next thing is action. It's so many times I've looked at a guitar and gone, oh man, it's a really high action, and it's just totally not a high action. Now, I've been playing for so long, I know how I like my action set on each of the strings, especially depending on the bridge, because it makes a big difference, believe it or not. But I use a pick that, as it happens, is pretty much the same height I like my action underneath the little E string. So I simply slip it under that E string, and it should just nudge the string perfectly. And if it does, I know I'm good. So I recommend that you work out the kind of action you like over the 12th fret, and you'll find that it normally fits a coin. For example, in England, I know that roughly a 20 pence piece is approximately just under the string for my action. So you slip it on and you go, oh, yeah, that's good. Or you can eyeball it if you like, but it's just good to have a little gauge, and my pick, as it happens, is perfect for my action. I like a medium Jeff Beck type action. And actually, if you have your action too low, your string will not be able to rotate and properly give off the bass frequencies. So make sure that your action is at least medium to high, if you can handle it, like Rick Graham. Tip number 3, and I'm sure many of you will already know this, but there are definitely some of you that won't know this, and so I think it's a useful thing to show and demonstrate. Gibson-style guitars, or Gibson guitars, that have the stop-tail arrangement. I often find, and many people, including some very famous guitar players, have often found, that if you thread it traditionally through here and then over the saddles, the angle of the string is really sharp, and it can mean that you break strings, especially if you're a hard-hitting rhythm player. And of course, 99.3% of all songs is rhythm. Some guitar players, including Jimmy Page, prefer to thread the string through here and then wrap it over the tail before it goes over the saddle, and it gives you less of an angle and relief. And many people have found that this is a much more practical way of arranging a bridge on a Gibson-style guitar. You dirty motherfucker! Tip number 4. This is a really interesting and kind of unique one. Try tuning 2/4, like lots of other really cool guitar players do. If you've never tried this, it's completely weird and it'll throw you, but it does do some really interesting things. For example, you'll probably know by now that if you play a power chord and you shift it down, that works. But if you shift it down again, it doesn't work. Well, with 4ths, it all works. It's all in tune, and all the scales no longer have that shift for the 3rd on the G string. So here's a major scale. Here's what a blues scale should look like. It's weird, isn't it? It's a really interesting thing to do, changing the tuning. It makes you break out of the boxes, but also with 4ths, there are lots of possibilities and things, and I think it's definitely worth experimenting with 4ths, playing modally and taking a look at the different scale shapes. And if you come up with a really cool riff, then post it below, or find a way of sending me a link so I can check out what you've done. I actually had a guitar lesson with a guy who's quite well known who plays with 4ths, because I thought it was a really, really interesting and unique thing to do. And the funny thing to do is tune to 4ths and then play the chords that you're familiar with. Number 5. This is a really quick, really simple thing that every guitar player needs to know. I'm sure that 89.10 million% of you will already know this, but some of you won't, so I'm going to tell you. When you're stringing a guitar and you're threading your string through the eye, the hole in the tuning peg, make sure that as you wind that string on, if this is my string, make sure you pass over the string first and then under the string. And what this does is it pinches and locks the string in position at the post, and it prevents slipping, which is a really important thing to prevent, especially with really high-tech coated strings. I have noticed that, for example, paradigms, they never break, they sound amazing, but you've really got to make sure that you thread and tie properly, because if you don't, they're so slippery and perfect that they can slip off the tuner. So make sure that you thread good strings well. Number 6, I learnt this absolutely years ago and actually shot a video on this, but hardly any of you will ever have seen it. It was one of the first videos I ever shot for a company called Sonic State, which was really cool. And it was, if you don't have a lot of money and you're playing a lot of guitar, you can make your own plectrums from things like dead credit cards and hotel keys, and you can get inventive with shapes. Now, these are completely shit, but a classic example of the kind of thing never to make with your credit card. But actually, this one's pretty good, and I'm really proud of it, and I'll give you a close-up, and this is how it sounds. Honestly, when you start playing guitar and you get used to the feel of a new pick, after sort of a few minutes, you don't even really realise what you're playing. This is just made of a bit of a dead credit card or Visa card I had hanging around. And I could gig with that. It's completely fine. It didn't cost me a single penny. Number 7. If you are in a band and you do small tours or you gig and you're playing circuit type, smaller venues up to like, 300 cap kind of rooms like we get in England. If it's at all possible, try and make sure that your pedal board will run entirely on batteries if you need it to. And you're probably thinking, why am I going to go out and buy, 7 or 8 batteries to run my pedal board from? The thing is, a lot of affordable venues on the circuit tend to have really bad circuits and bad power, and it's very noisy. And the worst thing is if you got 8 pedals on a board, you're whacking it through the effects loop of your amp, and all you're going to hear is meh. It's a horrible sound. It's distracting, it's tiring, and you can't get rid of it. But if they all run on batteries, it really reduces the sound there, and it will make your life just so much more pleasant. So if you can, get pedals that run on batteries for a small circuit tour. And talking of tours, number 8, here are a bunch of things that you might not consider taking with you on tour, but that you really want to think about bringing with you, even to like a big gig, just in case. So I would recommend that you take valves, tubes for your amplifiers, fuses for amplifiers, replacement nuts. You don't think about this, but I've had a couple of the nuts blow out on me. And various brands, sometimes, if you're putting slightly thicker strings in a nut and the nut isn't really strong, it'll just snap, it'll give. But it won't fly off the guitar because it's glued in place. It'll just gradually ease apart, and then suddenly this one string will fret out horribly. It's a horrible experience. Bring a spare nut with you. Soldering iron, obvious reasons. Replacement locking nut in case you lose it or it falls off and you're playing your Floyd. Gaffer tape. Always bring gaffer tape. And the last rule is always bring gaffer tape. Number 9. As you progress on a tour, a lot of this is about touring, but I think it's kind of a useful and interesting thing for people to know. As you play show after show after show, inevitably you will find you get more confident, you feel better, and you get stronger, because most people don't play hardcore shows every night and put everything into it and use a lot more strength when you're playing live. And what you'll find is that suddenly your strings will quickly feel too soft. If you start off playing 10s, you're going to want to move up to 11s by about show 5. This is my experience, and experience of many other people. Unless you are really experienced and you've been doing this for a long time and you are set in your ways and you play every single day, you'll probably find that you need to shift up the action and the gauge of string as you play shows on tour. I went from playing 10 to 52 to playing 10 to 56, playing 11 to 56, all in one tour over like 8 dates. And the action went up about 1.5 million. It's crazy. These things just happen. Same with picks too. And number 10. As a gentleman who travels a great deal around the world to play guitar, to perform, to do all sorts of business in the guitar world, I recommend that you take probiotics 2 weeks before you go traveling to a foreign country, because your gut flora determine an awful lot about your overall health. And you might think, taking vitamins and things are going to really make you healthy and prevent disease. Well, they're not going to get into you if you don't have the correct gut flora. Always remember, it's not what you take, it's what you absorb that makes the biggest difference. So if you're going to go from, for example, America, and you're going to go and play in England, you don't have a lot of the gut flora that we have here. And if someone from England is going to go and play in, for example, Indonesia, you're going to get a problem real quick unless you are accommodated to their water, to things that, the little tiny animals that live in the water that you need to get used to. So you can buy specialist probiotics that prepare your gut flora for trips to foreign countries. There are loads of them. I'm not going to try and sell you a brand. There's one that I now use. But I recommend 2 weeks before you travel for touring, get probiotics in you and take them throughout the tour. And it's more important than almost anything that you do that, because as soon as you get a case of the runs or a horrendous stomach infection and it's just really uncomfortable, you can't shit on the bus unless you're going to hot bag it. You don't want to be that guy. Although at some point everyone is that guy. And here is a bonus, number 11 for you. This actually isn't from me. This is from someone else I know who is a mega professional guitar player. And he suggests if you are going to go out and play a really important gig, like a showcase, or a series of gigs like a tour, prepare backing tracks for every member of your band in the eventuality that they may break a limb, wake up too hungover to play, or quit. These things happen. And if it's a really important show and suddenly your second guitarist has just disappeared, got off the bus and just gone walking and he's never showed up, pop on the backing track, you're good to go. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult if it's the drummer, although I do know a band who once had a Duracell bunny, I might be showing my age here, and they put him on stage with the cymbals, and they wired up somehow this bunny to play along with the backing track of the drummer. So whenever the drummer went, he would just play, and it was a really cool on-stage thing. Anything can happen on tour, and it does. Been Rob Chapman. I hope you found some of these hints, tricks, tips, and hacks useful. Good luck. Chappers out.